Diana Reynolds had never lost a case. In 7 years, she had become Chicago's most feared attorney, her flame-red hair and piercing green eyes as legendary in the courtroom as her ruthless victories. But the man who walked into her office that autumn afternoon would shatter everything she thought she controlled. His name was Damien Blackwater, tall, ageless, dressed in a suit worth more than most people's homes, and when he smiled, the temperature in the room seemed to drop. He laid a check on her desk, an amount so large it silenced the last fragile piece of conscience she had left. At first, she told herself they were just complicated cases, defending companies, poisoning poor families, protecting pharmaceutical giants who sickened children, freeing predators disguised as businessmen. Every victory added zeros to her bank account while stripping away her soul. But then she saw it. Blackwater's shadow didn't match his body. Horns, claws, something alive slithering on the wall. And the file he handed her next wasn't business. It was murder. A children's hospital built to collapse, killing the sick for profit. Diana had only one choice: keep serving evil, or find a way to fight back. And this is where Diana's deal with the devil would unravel, dragging her from the courtroom into the heart of true horror. Diana Reynolds had never lost a case, not one. In the 7 years since she'd hung her law degree on the mahogany-paneled walls of her downtown Chicago office, her record remained unblemished. A perfect streak that had made her both wealthy and feared in equal measure. At 31, she was already being whispered about in the same breath as the city's legal legends, her flame-red hair and piercing green eyes becoming as recognizable in courtrooms as her ruthless tactics. But success had come at a price that Diana had stopped calculating long ago. Her secretary buzzed the intercom at exactly 3:17 p.m. on a Tuesday in October. "Miss Reynolds, there's a Mr. Blackwater here to see you. He says it's urgent, and he's willing to pay your premium consultation fee." Diana didn't look up from the contract she was reviewing. "Tell him to schedule an appointment like everyone else, Janet." "Ma'am, he's already paid. Cash. And he says it's regarding the Morrison Industries case." Diana's pen stopped moving. The Morrison Industries case had been sealed by court order 3 months ago. No one outside the immediate parties should have known about it, let alone the specific details that would make it worth discussing. She set down her pen and straightened her black Armani blazer. Send him in. The man who entered her office seemed to absorb the afternoon light filtering through her floor-to-ceiling windows. Damien Blackwater was tall, impeccably dressed in what looked like a suit that cost more than most people's cars, and possessed the kind of ageless quality that made it impossible to determine whether he was 45 or 60. His silver hair was slicked back perfectly, and his dark eyes seemed to catalog every detail of her office with the precision of an appraiser. But there was something else, something that made the temperature in the room seem to drop several degrees when he smiled. "Miss Reynolds," he said, his voice carrying a slight accent that Diana couldn't place. "I've been looking forward to meeting Chicago's most uncompromising attorney." Diana gestured to the leather chair across from her desk, studying him as he settled in with fluid grace. There was something predatory in the way he moved, like a large cat pretending to be domesticated. "Mr. Blackwater, I have to ask, how do you know about the Morrison case?" His smile widened, revealing teeth that were too white, too perfect. "I make it my business to know things, Miss Reynolds, particularly when those things involve legal matters that could benefit from your particular brand of flexibility." "Flexibility? Come now." Blackwater leaned forward, steepling his fingers. "We both know that your perfect record isn't built on moral high ground. The Morrison case alone convincing that jury that a chemical spill that poisoned 300 families was actually beneficial to the local ecosystem. Brilliant work, completely unconscionable, but brilliant. Diana felt a flicker of something, not quite shame, but close to it. She pushed the feeling aside with practiced ease. I work within the legal system, Mr. B. Blackwater. What my clients do with their freedom afterward is their business. Exactly. Blackwater's eyes seemed to gleam in the dim office light, which is why I think we'll work very well together. He reached into his briefcase and placed a check on her desk. Diana glanced at it and felt her breath catch. The amount written in Blackwater's precise handwriting was more than she typically made in 6 months. This is just the retainer, he said casually. I have several ongoing legal matters that require immediate attention. Some might be considered morally complex. Diana's practical mind took over, drowning out the small voice in her head that had been growing quieter with each passing year. What kind of legal matters? Property disputes primarily. Some business contracts that need restructuring. A few regulatory issues that need to be resolved with minimum public attention. Blackwater's fingers drummed against the arm of his chair. Nothing you haven't handled before, I'm sure. Diana had handled worse, much worse. She'd gotten pharmaceutical companies off the hook for drugs that had caused birth defects. She'd helped real estate developers evict entire communities from their homes. She made sure that companies could continue polluting rivers while their executives slept soundly in their mansions. Each victory had added another zero to her bank account and another layer of ice around her heart. I'll need to see the specific cases before I can commit to anything, she said, though they both knew she'd already made her decision the moment she'd seen that check. Of course. Blackwater reached into his briefcase again and produced a thick folder. These should give you a good starting point. I trust you'll find them educational. Diana opened the folder and immediately understood why Blackwater had come to her. The first case involved a construction company that had built low-income housing on contaminated land. The second was about a pharmaceutical company that had knowingly sold tainted medication to children's hospitals. The third made her stomach turn. A human trafficking ring disguised as an international modeling agency. Any other lawyer would have shown Blackwater the door. Diana saw opportunity. These are complicated cases, she said carefully. I prefer to think of them as challenges, Blackwater replied. And I'm willing to pay very well for someone who can find creative solutions to challenges. Diana looked at the check again, then at the photographs of sick children attached to the pharmaceutical case file. For a moment, she could almost hear her father's voice, back when he was still sober, back when he still believed that people were fundamentally good. Diana, sweetheart, the law isn't about winning. It's about justice. It's about making sure the strong can't prey on the weak. That was before her mother's medical bills had bankrupted them, before her father had started drinking himself to death, before Diana had learned that justice was a luxury that only the wealthy could afford. She closed the folder and extended her hand to Blackwater. Mr. Blackwater, you've just hired Chicago's most uncompromising attorney. His handshake was cold, much colder than any human hand should be. Diana's office had grown darker over the fall months. She'd had the windows tinted, claiming the afternoon sun was interfering with her work. But the truth was that bright light had begun to hurt her eyes. She spent most of her days in artificial light now, reviewing cases that would have made her law school professors weep. The construction company case had been her masterpiece of legal maneuvering. She'd managed to get the contaminated land reclassified as acceptable for low-income housing by arguing that the residents, being poor, had lower life expectancy anyway. The judge had been horrified, but her arguments were technically sound. 23 families had been forced to stay in homes that were slowly poisoning them, and Blackwater had paid her a bonus that was larger than her father's annual salary had ever been. The pharmaceutical case had been even easier. She'd simply buried the opposition in paperwork and legal delays until the parents of the affected children couldn't afford to continue fighting. The settlement she'd negotiated required the families to sign non-disclosure agreements, ensuring that no other victims would ever come forward. But it was the human trafficking case that had truly revealed the depths of her moral flexibility. She'd gotten the charges dropped by arguing that the models were independent contractors who had knowingly entered into their agreements. She'd managed to paint the victims as willing participants, despite evidence of coercion, violence, and imprisonment. 47 young women and girls remained trapped in a system that Diana had just made legal. With each case, the checks from Blackwater grew larger, and Diana's reflection in the mirror grew harder to recognize. Her green eyes had developed dark circles that no amount of concealer could hide. Her hair had lost some of its vibrant red color, taking on a dull, lifeless quality. She'd lost weight, though she barely ate anymore. Food had started to taste like ash in her mouth. But her bank account had never been healthier, and her reputation as a lawyer who could make any problem disappear had never been stronger. It was on a particularly gray November morning that Diana first noticed something was wrong with Blackwater himself. She'd been reviewing a new case, something involving a series of mysterious disappearances near one of his construction sites, when he'd entered her office unannounced. "Miss Reynolds," he said, his voice carrying a strange harmonic quality that made her ears ring. "I trust the Riverside project is proceeding smoothly?" Diana looked up from her notes and felt her blood freeze. Blackwater's shadow on the wall behind him was wrong. While he stood normally in her office, his shadow seemed to writhe and twist as if it were alive. The silhouette showed something with far too many limbs and what looked like horns curving from its skull. Yes, the project is moving forward," Diana stammered, trying to convince herself that she was seeing things. Too much caffeine, too little sleep. That had to be it. "Excellent. I have another matter I need you to handle." Blackwater placed a new file on her desk, and Diana noticed that his fingernails seemed longer than they had been before, and darker, almost like claws. "This one is rather time-sensitive." Diana opened the file with hands that she hoped weren't shaking visibly. Inside were photographs of a children's hospital and documents relating to a new wing that was scheduled to be built. The construction company was one of Blackwater's holdings, and the contracts showed that they planned to use substandard materials and cut corners on safety features. "Miss Blackwater, this is a children's hospital. If these materials fail, then it will be very sad, won't it?" Blackwater's smile revealed teeth that seemed sharper than Diana remembered, but also very profitable. "The insurance payouts alone will triple our investment, not to mention the contracts we'll get to rebuild it properly afterward." Diana stared at the documents, her mind reeling. She was looking at plans that would almost certainly result in the deaths of sick children. The weight-bearing supports would fail within 5 years. The fire suppression systems were designed to malfunction. Even the electrical systems were rigged to create hazardous conditions. "I can't do this," she said quietly. Blackwater's smile faded, and the temperature in the room dropped so quickly that Diana could see her breath misting in the air. I beg your pardon? This is this is mass murder. I may have bent a lot of rules, but I've never... Never what? Blackwater stood up, and Diana could swear he seemed taller than before. Never helped companies poison families? Never enabled child trafficking? Never watched innocent people suffer for your own profit? Each accusation hit Diana like a physical blow because she knew they were all true. She told herself that she wasn't directly responsible for the consequences of her legal victories, but she'd always known that was a lie. "This is different," she whispered. "No, Miss Reynolds, it isn't. The only difference is the scale." Blackwater leaned forward, placing his hands on her desk, and Diana saw that his fingernails had indeed become claws, sharp enough to scratch deep gouges in the mahogany surface. "You've already sold your soul to me piece by piece. This is simply the final installment." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Diana looked at Blackwater's face and finally saw him clearly. His skin had a grayish tint that seemed to shift and move like smoke. His eyes were completely black now, reflecting no light at all. And when he smiled, she could see rows of teeth like a shark's, sharp and numerous and designed for tearing flesh. "You're not human," she breathed. "Very good, counselor. I was wondering when you'd figure that out." Blackwater's voice had changed, becoming something that seemed to come from multiple throats at once. "I've been cultivating you for quite some time, Diana. You've been such a useful tool for spreading misery and corruption. Do you have any idea how much negative energy a single one of your cases generates? The despair, the suffering, the loss of faith in justice itself. It's all quite delicious." Diana tried to stand up, but her legs wouldn't support her. "What are you? I think you know what I am. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" The thing that had been calling itself Damien Blackwater circled her desk like a predator. "You can't turn me in. Who would believe you?" "You can't refuse my cases. We have contracts, binding ones, and you certainly can't undo all the damage you've already done. So what's your play, counselor?" Diana's mind raced through her options, but every path led to the same conclusion. She was trapped. She'd walked into this trap willingly, one case at a time, one compromised value at a time. "I'll do it," she said, the words feeling like poison in her mouth. "I'll handle the hospital case." Blackwater's inhuman smile widened. "Excellent. I knew you'd see reason. The contracts should be finalized by the end of the week. I trust there won't be any complications." He moved toward the door, his form seeming to shift and blur as he walked. Just before he reached it, he turned back to her. "Oh, and Diana? Don't even think about running. I can find you anywhere. After all, you belong to me now." The door closed behind him with a sound like a tomb ceiling, and Diana was left alone in her dark office, staring at the plans that would murder children and make her rich beyond her wildest dreams. She sat there for hours, unable to move, unable to think, unable to do anything but stare at the photographs of smiling sick children who had no idea that their trusted hospital was about to become their grave. Diana hadn't slept in 48 hours. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the faces from the hospital photographs. She'd tried drinking herself unconscious, but alcohol only seemed to make the visions clearer. She'd tried working on other cases, but the words on every document seemed to rearrange themselves into accusations. She was walking through the corridors of Chicago General Hospital at 2 a.m, not really sure why she was there or what she hoped to accomplish. She told herself she was just conducting research for another case, but she knew that was a lie. She'd come here because she needed to see something pure, something untainted by her corruption. The pediatric ward was quiet except for the soft sounds of medical equipment and the occasional whisper of nurses making their rounds. Diana found herself standing outside the window of the neonatal intensive care unit, looking at tiny babies fighting for their lives in plastic incubators. They're beautiful, aren't they? Diana spun around, her heart hammering. Behind her stood an elderly man in hospital maintenance coveralls. He was small and slightly stooped, wearing a baseball cap that cast shadows across his weathered face. But what struck Diana immediately were his hands. They were covered in old scars that looked like nail wounds. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to startle you," the man said gently. "I work nights here. Don't often see visitors this late. I needed to think," Diana said, surprised by how easily the truth came out. "Heavy thoughts, I imagine. The kind that keep you walking hospital corridors at 2 a.m. Diana looked at him more closely. There was something about his presence that felt different from everyone else she'd encountered in months. When she looked at him, the constant weight of guilt and fear that had been pressing down on her seemed to lighten slightly. "Are you all right, miss? You look like you've been carrying a heavy burden." Yes, I suppose I have been." Diana found herself unable to look away from his scarred hands. Do you ever wonder if someone can be too far gone to be saved? The old man was quiet for a long moment, considering her question. "I've worked in this hospital for many years," he finally said. "I've seen people at their absolute worst, addicts who've overdosed for the 10th time, criminals who've been shot in gang wars, people who've hurt others in unimaginable ways. And you know what I've learned?" Diana shook her head. "Everyone can be saved. Everyone. But first, they have to want to be saved. They have to be willing to face what they've done and choose to be different." He paused, studying her face. "The question is, are you ready to make that choice?" Before Diana could answer, the old man gestured toward a nearby family waiting area. "There's someone I think you should meet. Someone who's been waiting a very long time to talk to you." Diana followed him, not sure why she trusted this stranger, but unable to resist. In the small waiting area, sitting alone on a blue plastic chair, was a woman who looked to be in her early 30s. She had the same red hair as Diana, the same green eyes, the same delicate bone structure. But where Diana looked hollow and haunted, this woman radiated warmth and kindness. "Hello, Diana," the woman said, standing up with a smile that made Diana's chest ache with a longing she'd forgotten she could feel. Who are you?" "I think you know," the woman said gently, "though I know it's hard to believe." Diana's knees gave out and she collapsed into the nearest chair. "You can't be. You died when I was 6 months old." "I did." Catherine Reynolds moved to sit beside her daughter, and Diana caught the scent of something she remembered from her earliest childhood: vanilla and roses, the perfume her father said her mother had always worn. "But some bonds can't be broken by death, sweetheart. A mother's love for her child is one of them." "This isn't real," Diana whispered. "I'm having a breakdown. Too much stress, too little sleep, too much guilt." "You're not having a breakdown, Diana. This is real. I'm real." Catherine reached out toward her daughter's cheek, and Diana felt a warmth spread through her as if she were being comforted by a loving touch, though nothing physical made contact. "I've been watching over you your whole life. I've seen everything, the good and the bad." "Then you know what I've become," Diana said, tears streaming down her face. "You know what I've done." "Yes, I do. And it breaks my heart. Not because I'm disappointed in you, but because I can see how much pain you're in." Catherine's voice was filled with infinite compassion. "You've been carrying this alone for so long, thinking that success and money would fill the hole that losing me left in your life. It wasn't supposed to be this way, Diana sobbed. I was supposed to be one of the good ones. I was going to help people, make things better, honor your memory. Oh, sweetheart, you still can. You still can. No, I can't. I've done terrible things. I've helped monsters hurt innocent people. I've sold my soul to something evil, and I can't undo any of it. Catherine was quiet for a moment, then she began to speak in a voice that carried the weight of absolute truth. When you were born, Diana, I made you a promise. I promised that no matter what happened to me, I would always find a way to protect you. I promised that I would never let the darkness win. She reached into the pocket of her cardigan and pulled out something small and silver. It was a tiny baby rattle, tarnished with age but still beautiful. I bought this for you the day I found out I was pregnant. I wanted you to have something that would always remind you that you were loved, that you were chosen, that you were worthy of all the good things in the world. Catherine placed the rattle in Diana's hands. I never got the chance to give it to you before I died, but I can give it to you now. Diana clutched the rattle to her chest, feeling warmth spread through her body for the first time in months. I don't know how to come back from what I've done. Yes, you do. You start by choosing love over fear. You start by choosing what's right over what's profitable. You start by remembering who you really are, not the person that pain and loss turned you into, but the person you were meant to be. But Blackwater, he's not human. He's something evil, and he owns me. I signed contracts. Contracts can be broken, Diana. Evil only has the power you give it. Catherine stood up and kissed the top of her daughter's head. Keep this with you, she said, indicating the rattle. When you're faced with a choice between darkness and light, hold on to it, and remember that love is always stronger than fear. Catherine began to fade, becoming translucent in the hospital's fluorescent lighting. I have to go now, but I want you to know that I'm proud of you for being here, for wanting to change. That's the hardest step, and you've already taken it. Mom, wait. I love you, Diana. I've always loved you. And no matter what you've done, no matter how far you've fallen, that love will always be waiting to lift you up. Catherine disappeared, leaving only the faint scent of vanilla and roses and the warm weight of the silver rattle in Diana's hands. The old maintenance man was still there, watching her with kind eyes. Now you know what you have to do, he said simply. Diana nodded, wiping tears from her face. I have to stop him. I have to stop the hospital project, even if it destroys me. It won't destroy you, child. It will save you. The man smiled, and Diana noticed again the nail scars on his hands, the deep compassion in his eyes. Keep that rattle close. When evil tries to claim you, remember where you came from and who you really are. Diana looked down at the rattle, then back up, but the maintenance man was gone. She was alone in the waiting area, but she no longer felt alone. For the first time in years, she felt like she had the strength to fight. Diana arrived at her office at dawn, the silver rattle tucked safely in her jacket pocket. She spent the morning systematically reviewing every case she'd handled for Blackwater, documenting every crime, every cover-up, every act of corruption. She printed copies of everything, organized them into files, and prepared a complete confession that detailed her role in each atrocity. Then she called the FBI, the State Attorney General's office, the Chicago Police Department, and every major newspaper in the city. By noon, her office was surrounded by federal agents, and she was sitting across from a table of prosecutors who looked like they couldn't believe what they were hearing. Miss Reynolds, said Agent Sarah Mitchell, the FBI's lead investigator on organized crime. What you're describing is the largest corruption scandal in Chicago's history. You understand that cooperating with us doesn't grant you immunity from prosecution. I understand, Diana said. I'm not looking for a deal. I'm looking for justice. And this Damien Blackwater, where can we find him? Diana provided Blackwater's address, his business holdings, his financial information, everything she had. But even as she did, she knew that when the authorities went looking for him, they would find nothing. Creatures like Blackwater didn't leave paper trails that human law enforcement could follow. The confession took 6 hours. When it was over, Diana was officially under federal investigation. Her assets were frozen, and her law license was suspended pending criminal charges. She would almost certainly spend the rest of her life in prison. But for the first time in years, she felt free. It was nearly midnight when she finally left the federal building. She'd expected to find Blackwater waiting for her, but the street was empty except for the usual late-night traffic. She walked the 12 blocks to her apartment, her hand never leaving the rattle in her pocket. She was 3 blocks from home when she felt the temperature drop. Diana. She turned around, and there he was. But Blackwater wasn't even pretending to be human anymore. He stood nearly 8 feet tall, his business suit replaced by what looked like shadows made solid. His eyes burned like coals in a face that shifted between human and something reptilian. Behind him, the street lamps flickered and went out one by one. "You've been a very naughty girl," he said, his voice echoing from multiple dimensions at once. "Do you have any idea what you've cost me?" "I know exactly what I've cost you," Diana replied, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "I've cost you your puppet. I've cost you your corruption. I've cost you your hold on me." Blackwater laughed, and the sound shattered windows in the buildings around them. "You think you can just walk away? You think confessing to the authorities changes anything between us? You signed contracts, Diana. Binding contracts. Your soul belongs to me." "No," Diana said, pulling the rattle from her pocket. The moment it touched the air, it began to glow with a soft, warm light. "My soul belongs to love. It belongs to the mother who died protecting me. It belongs to every person I could still help, every wrong I could still right, every act of kindness I could still perform." Blackwater recoiled as if the light had burned him. "What is that thing?" "A reminder of who I really am." Diana stepped forward, and Blackwater actually backed away from her. "You preyed on my grief, my loneliness, my desperation. You convinced me that money and success were worth more than my integrity. But you made one mistake. And what's that? You thought you could erase love. You thought you could make me forget that I was someone's daughter, that I was meant for something better than serving you." The rattle's light grew brighter, and Diana felt strength flowing into her from a source she couldn't name. "But love doesn't die, even when people do. And love is always stronger than fear." Blackwater snarled and lunged at her, his form shifting into something with claws and fangs and too many joints. But when he reached the circle of light surrounding Diana, he struck something solid and was thrown backward into the street. "This isn't over," he hissed, his form already beginning to fade as the rattle's light drove him back. "You think your little trinket will protect you forever? You think love is stronger than the darkness you've already spread? Those children you've condemned, those families you've destroyed, those victims you've silenced, they're still suffering because of you." "I know," Diana said quietly, "and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make amends for that. But I won't spend another minute serving you." With a scream of rage that shattered every remaining window on the block, Blackwater vanished, leaving behind only the acrid smell of sulfur and burned concrete. Diana stood alone under the streetlights, clutching her mother's gift, and began the long walk home. The federal penitentiary in Illinois wasn't a pleasant place, but Diana had found peace there in ways she never had in her luxury apartment or corner office. She'd pled guilty to all charges: corruption, conspiracy, accessory to multiple felonies, obstruction of justice. The judge had sentenced her to 25 years, but with good behavior and her continued cooperation with federal investigations, she might be eligible for parole in 15. It was more than she deserved and far less than she'd feared. She spent her days in the prison library, helping other inmates file appeals, prepare for parole hearings, and navigate the legal system that had once been her weapon of choice. She helped women who'd been trafficked understand their rights. She assisted families who'd been cheated by corporations. She did everything she could to use her legal knowledge for good instead of evil. The silver rattle sat on the small shelf in her cell, catching the morning sunlight that streamed through the narrow window. Sometimes late at night, she could swear she smelled vanilla and roses, and she knew that her mother was still watching over her. The children's hospital had been built with proper materials and safety features after Diana's confession exposed Blackwater's construction company. 47 trafficking victims had been rescued and were receiving counseling and support. 3 pharmaceutical companies had been forced to pay massive settlements to the families they'd harmed. It wasn't enough to undo all the damage Diana had caused, but it was a beginning. And for the first time in her adult life, Diana Reynolds was exactly where she belonged. She was free.